here we go.
Welcome to the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back in to the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast. Pat and Scott, we are finishing out week 15, going into week 16. One more matchup to speak of during this week. We have one game to play Monday Night Football, the Los Angeles Rams and the Green Bay Packers, two teams that are somehow still alive in a playoff hunt in the NFL. And we'll see how that shakes out moving down the road. Speaking of playoff hunt, we hope that we are able to keep you in yours with some of our picks, our news, our insights here at the 9 Route. I'm 1-1 on my playoffs for this week. Looking forward to hopefully something to salvage after some of these injuries for next week. But how did you make out, my friend? How was your weekend? I know you were in a couple more playoff runs than I had.
I did really well this weekend. I'm out of one playoff. I lost one league, but I really shouldn't even have been in the playoffs. The commissioner, when he started the league, I guess thought that he was going to get 12 teams. So he set the league up so that it was a 6-team playoff. And then for whatever reason, I guess he didn't get enough interest or whatever. So it ended up being an 8-team league, but he never went back and switched to a 4-team playoff. So there ended up being 6 of the 8 teams in the playoff. I made the playoffs with like a 4-10 record or something like that.
Your league, buddy.
It was terrible. I shouldn't have been in the playoffs, but I almost won if it wasn't for Ramondre Stevenson playing and having a good game, which I'm not complaining about because he did help me take a commanding lead in one of the leagues that the one league that I have won quite a few times. Looking to go for championship number 6 in that league this year. So I'm not complaining. I'll take the points from Stevenson, but pretty good. As far as fantasy goes, pretty good day. I took a poop betting this week, lost pretty much every bet that I made. And it was, I do a lot of parlays. I don't like to bet a lot, so I'll do a lot of small, $5, $10 here and there, but I'll make it a parlay and try to, up the odds on it or whatever. And it was like every parlay I was just missing on one little piece here. And that's why you're getting the odds you're getting, because they all need to hit. But fantasy-wise, I cannot complain as far as, how the first week of the playoffs went. Pretty happy with that. So hopefully we can, I took a lot of my own advice, sat some of the guys I said that I was going to sit or that our listeners should sit, and it worked out for me. So hopefully we'll have another good week and move on to championship Sunday, I guess, right? It'll be Sunday. I don't know what games they're playing on what days anymore. Everything's kind of a blur at this point, but
this is a crazy week with the holiday coming up. So you're talking heavy Saturday, a few on Sunday. There's still a Monday game. Thursday, let's see, what do you got? We're looking at Jacksonville Jets Thursday, and then the Lions share games Saturday, Christmas Eve, 3 games Sunday, and then a Monday night capper of the Chargers and the Colts.
Yeah, that's not a bad setup. I do like the games being on Christmas Eve rather than Christmas Day, because Christmas Day you can kind of, if there's only one game on, you can kind of throw it on in the background and, still do whatever it is that you do, family, gifts, all that stuff. When there's a full slate of games, it's difficult, at least for me. I know that I like to be planted in front of the TV and kind of paying attention to everything that's going on. It's kind of part of the deal with doing a podcast is you need to be a little bit informed as to what's going on. So I do try to watch as many games as I can. It is nice that it will be Christmas Eve. We'll be wrapping a lot of presents that day, the ones that didn't get to this weekend. And then, it'd be nice to have some games on during all of that nonsense. But got some unfortunate injury news right before we came on here. I guess it's probably time. You want to give them our socials and our all that good stuff, and then we'll jump into the news here?
Absolutely. For news and notes, for any contact with us, we have a few ways you can reach out to us here at the 9 Route. Our website is www.the9routeffb.com. You can always check through there and catch all the links to everything. We are the 9routeFFB@gmail.com. If you want to shoot us an email for questions, comments, concerns, let us know how we're doing. Again, that's always a quick, handy way to do that. We are on Twitter at the 9route1. And I am also at Scott from Thelco. If you ever want to, again, go back and forth, we can always shoot the breeze fantasy-wise, get involved during a game, talking about how things are going in real time for the NFL team and your fantasy team. Again, we'd like to be a little interactive when it comes to that. I guess, unfortunately, we'll dive right into the first injury that is kind of a doozy. Pat, you want to take this one?
I don't want to, but I will because I know it hurts you more than it hurts me.
Time for the news.
Speaking of Hurts, Jalen
Hurts.
Waiting for it. Jalen Hurts was just added to the injury report today. Looks like there was a sprain to his throwing shoulder. His status is in question for the Dallas game this week, which would be the nightcap, right, on Christmas Day. Is that
right now? That's just talking about that. It's still considered a 4:00 game, 4:25, but with Las Vegas and Pittsburgh as the late game, there is probably a good chance. I've been hearing whispers of the game being flexed based off of what that game really means to everything. Obviously, for the NFL, that has a bit of an impact. But yeah, there's a potential. I've heard flex to Christmas Day. But now, if there's some circles of doubt, we'll see. You probably hear about it in the next 2 days if something like that changed.
Yeah, usually if they flex it, it's you usually know by the week prior. So more than likely we'll stay at that 425 spot. But either way, it's tough for the Eagles. As a Cowboys fan, you could say Eagles got to play Dallas without Dak Prescott earlier in the season. This is sort of Dallas's chance to even the score, I guess, turn the tables and get to play the Eagles with a backup quarterback if Hurts unfortunately doesn't go. But as far as fantasy goes, I mean, Hurts has been amazing. I mean, depending on the type of scoring that you're in, he's probably either number one or in the top 3 scoring quarterbacks on the year for fantasy. So losing him right in the semifinals of your playoffs is not ideal. Unfortunately, if you have Jalen Hurts, you're going to have to figure something else out. I know you have him, you said, in one of your leagues, in the one league that you still have left in the playoffs. I know I have him in our Dynasty League as well. Luckily, I have a bunch of quarterback options in that league. You were not so fortunate, from what I'm understanding.
Yeah, that can actually take us into the next one. My quarterbacks of record that just got me out of my first round win, which was a good one, getting me into the semifinals. Jalen Hurts, and it's a super flex league, and I had, hopefully still have, maybe, fingers crossed, Ryan Tannehill. Had an ankle injury earlier this year. Same thing, looks like kind of reared its ugly head again. They had him in the tent and then kind of carted him off. Did return, but there was a lot of pain there. Again, these guys are warriors, and the trainers work magic, things that you or I are never, able to see behind those closed doors. But did return to the game. And again, Tennessee is definitely playing for, kind of like to say their playoff lives, so to speak. The Jacksonville Jaguars, with their big upset at Dallas yesterday, are only a game behind Tennessee. And the way the AFC is right now, playoff-wise, Tennessee obviously would have roughly a 4 seed. Jacksonville knocking on the door of a wild card spot. So if that flip-flops, that could be a tough row to hoe for the defending AFC South champs,
yes,
which was Tennessee last year. And they were the number 1 overall seed, if I'm not mistaken, and
they
got
were
knocked out first by Cincinnati. That was a tough game. So, Tannehill, I'm really hoping I hope I don't have to hitch my wagon to him. I'd rather have Jalen. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, one or the other would at least be nice in the spot that you're in. One other quarterback that left the game this past Sunday, Colt McCoy, was diagnosed with a concussion, did not return to the game. He's just going to have to clear the concussion protocol in order to come back and start next week, which, at this point, doesn't really matter. I mean, Arizona's really not doing anything. Colt McCoy is not, by any means a fantasy relevant quarterback. I mean, I'm sure, like you said, Scott, if you're in Superflex, if you got some injuries, he's out there on your waiver wire, which he probably isn't. Not a bad pickup. Trace McSorley would be the backup. He played this past Sunday and would be the starter if McCoy can't go. There might be an option for you, Scott, to grab off the waiver
as
wire.
we are speaking.
You're like, going
to that damn waiver wire and go, oh God, yeah. See, folks, that's the kind of insight we're talking about. You're kind of like, you get the mental block and you're thinking, oh man, what can I do? What can I do? And then you really kind of have to step back, stop looking at the trees and look at the whole forest and then focus in. And sometimes it does come back around. Pat, thank you for that, guys. Here at the 9 Route. That is live, that is static, that is happening as we speak. You only get it here, folks.
Happy to help. That's what we're here for.
We'll chop the pot. Don't worry. Yeah,
I think that's the only league that I'm not in with you.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, your work league and stuff like that, obviously. But as far as like that league is with, people that we both know. But that was the one that I did not get into because I was getting to the point where I was like, I don't think I could do another draft. My brain is fried at this point.
Oh, man. I'm pushing my 37 large and fab. All in. Trace McSorley. Don't let me down, dog. Come on.
Good Lord.
Yeah, it's
all right. Well, since you are busy, I'll go on and take the next one as well. This is just an update to an injury that we had talked about last week. Dameon Pierce for the Houston Texans. He has now been placed on IR, pretty much done for the rest of the season. So again, if you're looking at potential waiver wire options, I'm not really loving anybody on the Texans as far as waiver wire goes. But in week 15. The Texans, were very quiet about who they were going to replace Dameon Pierce with. And there was a lot of speculation in the fantasy community, whether it was going to be Daria Gumawale, whether it was going to be, perhaps Rex Burkhead. I know that I went and picked up Rex Burkhead in a few leagues. And as it turns out, the Texans ended up giving the ball mostly to Royce Freeman. He had 11 carries for 51 yards. He also added 1 catch for 5 yards on 1 target. Wasn't a game where the Texans were running the ball a ton. They did sort of have to throw the ball a little bit to keep up with Kansas City. And, I guess, the way it looks like the Texans are going to give Royce Freeman a shot. They did this week. I'm assuming it's going to be the same next week. But, again, that's something that you just can't really tell, especially with the Texans. They kind of are bouncing all over the place. They're playing 2 different quarterbacks, and even Philip Dorsett attempted a pass in that game versus the Chiefs. So kind of a wild card with the Texans. I really am not looking to pick up anybody if you were in an absolute desperate situation, nobody else available, and your running backs are injured or whatever. I would probably go with Ogunbowale because he did get 8 carries. Didn't do much with them, but he tends to be their pass catching back a little bit. Rex Burkhead led the Texans with 4 targets in that game, but Ogunbowale is a good pass catcher, and he would probably be the guy that I'm targeting moving forward because even though Freeman's getting the majority of the carries, if you're not talented, which Freeman, really isn't, those carries don't really mean a whole lot in a Texans offense that struggled at best this season.
Speaking of struggles, it's been a bit of a struggle for the reigning number 1 fantasy football running back, Jonathan Taylor, and it looks like you might be able to stick the fork in that pork chop. I think he's done. High ankle sprain, does not look good that he would even play again this season. Colts are obviously, pretty much angling towards next year for the draft. It has been an issue throughout the season where he had been a bit of an Iron Man and then turned out to be a little bit more of a guy that came down to earth, missed his first practice and things of that nature. So Jonathan Taylor definitely looking like a goner for this season. Now that will have a big effect for a lot of people, albeit the production may not have been there, but he was unsittable, so to speak, based off of his draft position. So, in a minute, we'll talk about the waiver wire options for you. And a couple quick ones here at the end that are, may or may not have an effect. One, Austin Eckler, just want to have to talk about it for a sec. Shoulder injury, left the game, came back in pretty quick. Their tests were negative, according to Brandon Staley today. So just something to keep eyes on. It might be a little limited through the week. Definitely not sitting, but, could have a little bit of a production issue, down the road. They may look to take the load off of him for this week. We'll see how it goes, but they should clear him for that. And then one that happened a little bit earlier this week, Tyler Lockett Ended up with a broken finger. Obviously, for a wide receiver, it's a little bit of a tough one. Couldn't have happened at a worse time for the Seattle Seahawks. That Thursday night matchup with San Fran was a little bit too tough for him, and they are circling the wagons to stay in the playoff hunt. He's going to be out probably at least a week or two, maybe more. And obviously with that, they want to get him back on the field, but if they feel like they have a shot at a playoff run, it's really tough right now. So you might see him sooner than later, but then that productivity could be a little bit affected by, obviously having a busted digit on your hand when you're trying to catch a line drive football, break off a press coverage, run block. If he's not able to do it, they just can't put him on the field. So hopefully, again, with our waiver wires coming up here, Pat, we'll start to talk about some options for replacements and some hot hands and big names that are starting to make a move.
The Austin Eckler thing, it was good to see him come back. He had a good game. Don't think it's going to limit him enough to where he's going to miss any time, especially considering that the Chargers are in the midst of, trying to claw and scratch their way into the playoffs. I think Eckler is definitely the type of guy that would tough that out. Tyler Lockett, I'm sure, wants to play, but I believe he had surgery on his finger or is about to have surgery on the finger. So he's probably a little bit less likely. But like you said, we'll get into some waiver wire options as far as the Seattle Seahawks go here in a minute. Just wanted to, before we jump into the waiver wire, just wanted to mention again, we mentioned it last week, we will mention again, understand that this week's a little bit different. Week 15, we had 3 games on Saturday, majority of the games on Sunday. This week coming up, we're going to have the majority of the games on Saturday and then just 3 games on Sunday. But do remember to look at your lineup and make sure that you are keeping your Sunday and even your Monday night options in the flex positions so that you have flexibility if somebody is, hurt last minute, or if you need to sub somebody in, sub somebody out. You don't want all of those flex spots being used up at 1:00 on Saturday, and then you have to make a last minute change. So just keep that in mind when you're setting your lineups. Make sure that you're paying attention to the times and the days that everyone is playing, and set your lineup accordingly. Make sure you get those players into their running back, wide receiver, tight end positional positions rather than your flex spots. All right. Well, now that we went through some injuries, let's talk about a couple guys that we can replace those injured players with.
Weekly waiver wire.
I will start with Jerick McKinnon because I have been sort of beating the drum for him for a while. I did not project or even think that there was a chance that he would end up being the back-to-back RB1 overall in weeks 14 and 15, but that has happened, at least with 1 game pending tonight. But he's been absolutely killing it. He is rostered more now than he was last week. He's up to 62%. Normally, we do not include anybody that's over 50% on this, but because we've been talking about him and because he's still available in about 38% of leagues, you need to go out and put him on your roster. Even if you don't plan on using him, you do not want someone that you're going to be playing in your playoffs to have the option to put him in against you, because right now he looks like the guy. As good as Isaiah Pacheco, has been, he just runs with, this reckless abandon that is great for, those tough grinded out yards. But when it comes to his vision and his ability to, make guys miss, when you're running at 145 miles an hour on every single time, every single play that you touch the ball, it's a little bit difficult to stop and make a guy miss and make a cut here and there. Like, I think he's a very good, very hard runner, but I think you're going to see a little bit more of McKinnon because he's a little bit more of that, shifty vision guy. He can catch the ball out of the backfield a little bit better. And I think as the Chiefs move into the end of this season, they're going to get Jerick McKinnon the ball a lot more. If you remember last season, McKinnon was basically their playoff starting running back. Like, they put Clyde Edwards-Helaire on the back burner and sort of let Jerick McKinnon take over in the playoffs. And he had an absolutely outstanding playoff run with them. And I think that you're seeing the beginning of that now. I think as much as the Chiefs don't want to have McKinnon out there all the time, every time he gets out there, he proves what he can do when you give him the ball. So I think you're going to see more of him. I'm not saying you have to necessarily pick him up to start him, but you definitely do not want him sitting on your waiver wire. If you have managers out there that are paying attention, somebody's going to go ahead and grab him if they haven't already. So definitely go ahead and pick him up if he's still available in your league.
Another running back, and we did just talk about the Jonathan Taylor possible season-ending injury. So Zach Moss, obviously was involved in the trade for Nyheim Hines with Buffalo earlier this season. Kind of got a little bit more work, I guess, than maybe even he expected. 24 carries, 81 yards for the Indianapolis Colts over the weekend. Was targeted once. And, Deion Jackson had kind of been the lead backup. He still ran 13 carries, 55 yards, and did get one catch on one target. But seeing that much given to Moss, who definitely seemed to slide right into that role that Taylor vacated, and I guess maybe that was their thought, was to do that. Seemed like he was preferred by Jeff Saturday. Deion Jackson would definitely be involved and in the mix right now. You'd have to see probably a hot hand approach, as long as nobody fumbles. But seeing Zach Moss get that kind of usage and production, obviously with a full game under his belt, game plan towards his style of running and things like that. It was always weird that he never kind of made anything happen. He had some issues, it sounds like, in Buffalo. But, as far as that goes, Zach Moss is available. Less than 1% in a lot of leagues. So he's out there. Go get him.
Yeah, you definitely got to pick him up. And again, just play that keep away game, if nothing else. Another guy that we talked about weeks and weeks ago, and then he got picked up a lot. And then I think once Cordell Patterson came back, the hype around Tyler Algier kind of faded a little bit, but he's still playing a good amount of snaps. Actually split snaps 50-50 with Patterson this past week. Ended up 139 yards on 17 carries and a touchdown. He did have more carries than Patterson in this game. And even if, those carries are split evenly, the Falcons run the ball enough to get both of these guys, Algier and Patterson, 15 to 17 rushes per game. So I think both of these guys, given the opportunity, can produce for you, especially now with Desmond Ridder at quarterback. I think the Falcons are going to want to throw the ball even less than they already had been. So I think Algier, who's only 28% rostered, is definitely a great pickup. I think he's somebody who, again, he can give you a spot start in case of an injury, or, just a guy who in a good matchup can do what he did. 139-1 is no joke. That's, you're looking at 20 some fantasy points right there. So definitely worth picking up. And again, in the right matchup could be playable.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Some of these end of year matchups for some of these teams are what really kind of shows out. A name that you might want to keep on your radar, could have been a little bit of an issue with the game itself, but Chuba Hubbard, call him Chuba, but we know that's not his name, was pretty, had some good games last season, hasn't really been involved as much this year. He's only rostered about 25% or so of leagues. If you're just looking to maybe throw a name out there, yes, Donta Foreman had a tough game against the Steelers, had a fumble, so maybe there's some smoke and fire when it comes to that team. Again, Carolina's still in a playoff hunt, so maybe another backup running back just to throw on your bench. And hey, you never know. Could be a desperate play, but could be worthwhile just adding on there if you have the room.
That seems like pretty much all of the running backs that we found as far as, low roster percentage that are worth picking up. I'm sure there's probably a few guys out there. Jaylen Warren had a pretty good game, double-digit rushes and a touchdown this week, but, we don't necessarily know. I think Pittsburgh is sort of realizing that they need to turn to the run game. They're going to be just like Atlanta, where they're running the ball, 60+% of the time. So Warren is another guy that you could potentially pick up. But again, with Najee Harris there, I don't think I'm starting Warren unless, Harris gets hurt in some kind of way. As far as wide receivers go, another guy that we've been talking about is a little bit more than 50% rostered, but we left him on here because this is somebody that we've been saying to pick up. Donovan Peoples-Jones for the Cleveland Browns. He had another double-digit PPR game this week, and I think caught a touchdown in this one, if I'm not mistaken. He's just been a very steady, solid receiver. Hasn't had, really big up games. He hasn't had, he hasn't single-handedly won you a week, but putting him in your lineup is a good, safe floor play. Deshaun Watson really seems to target him a lot, and he has 3 good remaining matchups for the final 3 weeks of the season: New Orleans, Washington, and then if you play in Week 18, Pittsburgh, which again, we're going to talk about in a little bit, I talked about last week, is not as good of a matchup as it seems like on paper, but most leagues don't play in week 18 anyway, so you wouldn't even have to hit that matchup. But definitely go out and grab Peoples-Jones if he's available, because he's definitely, I made the comparison to Will Fuller. He hasn't really been targeted on deep routes, which is strange because that's more of his forte. But he's definitely a guy who, like I said, Deshaun Watson seems to like. He's big body, young guy, fast, long. He's turning himself into a decent receiver. And again, depending on who you have in your wide receiver position, he could be your flex guy for the rest of the playoffs.
One more wide receiver. Why not? We got Treylon Burks. A lot of people have been very up and down on him. He was injured for some time. It didn't look like he was going to pan out in training camp. He's Tennessee's number one wide receiver. That's what they drafted him to be. Traded away A.J. Brown to the Eagles. He could be floating around out there, be dropped because of injury. And if that's the case, you want to get him on your roster as soon as possible, especially now if you're in a keeper league or something like that, dynasty, he'd be long gone, but get him on your roster. You never know. It might be worth the stash for even next season, depending on how things shake out. But I would have him around because, again, those Tennessee Titans are looking to make a strong playoff push, and you always want to have a number one wideout on your roster. You never know when you're going to have to pull that card and start to play a guy like Treylon Burks.
One other wide receiver that, again, we have been talking about for a while, the rostership percentage is going up for this player. It's Darius Slayton for the New York Giants. He's now rostered in 44% of leagues. He led the Giant wide receivers in targets again this Sunday against Washington. He's got a really good matchup in Week 16. I'm actually playing him in our Dynasty League as one of my flex positions. Goes up against Minnesota, and he's another one of those guys who isn't necessarily going to win you a week. See, there are guys on the waiver wire we'll use the one for this week. There are guys on the waiver wire like KJ Osborne who you could pick somebody like Osborne up and put him in your lineup and hope to God that he gives you, 30 points like he did this week. Or he could also give you, 3 points in a week. But then there are guys on your waiver wire like Darius Slayton who probably isn't going to give you 30 points at any point, this year, especially not with the Giants offense being as, run heavy as it is. But he's a guy who, when they do have to throw the ball, Daniel Jones is looking at him first. And like I said, that's why he's leading the wide receiver room in targets. He's a guy who's going to give you somewhere between 10 and 15 points every week. He's going to be pretty safe. And again, this matchup against Minnesota in Week 16 could actually maybe put up somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 points against a really bad Minnesota defense. So, again, if you're hurting at the wide receiver position, Darius Slayton is not a terrible option for you as well.
And going to wind down here, folks, with a couple of guys. And I'm going to throw actually like a piggyback to this. I know we talk about the Houston Texans, and they're kind of like, yeah, I know. Yeah, it's the Houston Texans. But you can find some gold in the chicken feed there. Nico Collins, he's been banged up, obviously, but has been heavily targeted and really highly involved. And to the point this season where obviously Brandon Cooks did not pan out, Nico Collins is a top 50 wide receiver, even with all the injuries that he has had, throughout the year. He's actually wide receiver 44. And another guy who's been coming on strong, and I know, Pat, you have him on your roster, Chris Moore, also of the Houston Texans, who's right behind him as far as that goes for projections for this week and everything. He really has been a guy that, again, both of these guys have been relevant fantasy players that could be a worthy flex start. Obviously going down the road, Houston has nothing to lose. They're just going to lean back and chuck the ball around and get some people involved. We just talked about Royce Freeman and things like that as far as filling in for Dameon Pierce. So Nico Collins, Chris Moore are a few guys that are probably hanging around. And then the final wide receiver we're going to talk about, Marquise Goodwin, who obviously with a Tyler Lockett injury is going to be probably fantasy relevant. He'll probably slide right into that number 2 role with Lockett out. You don't hear a lot outside of DK Metcalf and Lockett when it comes to that. Goodwin's had a few big plays. I know he had 1 or 2 good games this season, where he did kind of reestablish himself as a former fantasy football not star, but a guy you could definitely have on your roster, play as a flex. He's going to be available in most leagues. Again, Dynasty, maybe not so much, but again, most of your redraft keeper leagues, Marquise Goodwin, he's going to be a wide receiver too on a team that has a great quarterback in Geno Smith that's looking to make a playoff run and filling in that spot, getting anywhere from possibly 8 to 10 targets a game. Sign me up. I definitely want him on my roster.
Yeah, I think Goodwin's big games have been in games where either Lockett or Metcalf have, either not played or played and then left the game due to injury. So he's definitely, again, a usable piece. I think, depending on, the matchups down the stretch, which I believe they get Kansas City this week, if I'm not mistaken, they're going to have to score some points. So Marquise Goodwin could be one of those guys, especially if you play DFS, if you're in the daily fantasy, could be a low-priced option that could definitely score you a lot of points. So not a guy that I would necessarily want to have to play in my fantasy playoffs, but there are worse options out there, of course. That's pretty much going to do it for our waiver wire pickups for this week. We kept the list a little bit shorter due to the fact that there's really no more long-term waiver wire pickups. It's pretty much, pick up guys that are going to help you win now, or don't really bother, because in the leagues that you're playing in, these redraft leagues that you're in the playoffs, week 16 is the only week that matters. I mean, even your week 17 matchups, as far as, grabbing players for that matchup, if you have room on your bench, great, but you've really got to concentrate on winning this week to get to next week. So hopefully some of these players, if you need to pick up a running back or wide receiver, hopefully some of these players will be available for you if you need them, and they will do well for you. That's the hope. I think that, we try to give you the best options that we can find that are, reasonably available in leagues. Again, there may be the league that you're in, there may be better options out there on the waiver wire. There may also be none of these options out there on the waiver wire. I've noticed when I've gone through and done the roster percentages for, like I said, I do NFL.com, ESPN.com, and Yahoo. And I have noticed that the Yahoo roster percentages are always higher than the other two sites. And a lot of times the NFL.com is really, really low. I'm not 100% sure why that is. Maybe it's just there's more casual fans playing on NFL.com, and there's more, I guess, seasoned fantasy football veterans on Yahoo. I'm not really, that's my guess. I don't really know, but it seems like the Yahoo roster percentages are always a lot higher. But we do give you the average of those. So if you're playing in Yahoo, maybe some of these guys are not going to be available for you. But if you're in ESPN or NFL.com, might have even a little bit bigger selection. So just, go through, make sure that you're picking up the guys that matter for you. If you have any questions, as somebody that we didn't cover, like Scott said, please feel free to hit us up on social media. We are at the 9 Route 1 and at Scott from Delco on Twitter. You can also email us if you have any questions. Hey, should I pick this guy up? He's available on waivers, but you said this or whatever. Hit us up on our email, the9routeFFB@gmail.com. Let us know. We will get back to you with a detailed answer as quickly as possible. And then, again, check out our website, www.the9routeFFB.com. You can reach us on there. There is a contact section where you can get in touch with us, links to our socials and email address and all that good stuff. Also, before we head out, we want to thank Mickey's Portical Pub in Tuckerton, New Jersey for partnering with the show. If you're looking for a great place to watch the NFL on Sunday, Mickey's is it. They have great food, drink specials, and all the football you can handle. Mickey's Pub, 327 East Main Street in Tuckerton, New Jersey, where friends and family meet. I think that's it for this one. Do you have any last minute suggestions or concerns going into this? Obviously, other than the Jalen Hurts stuff. I mean, we're all concerned about that, but
yeah, no, Pat, I think you kind of nailed it there just a minute ago. At this point, if you're in the playoffs, you're going with what got you there. Again, we're just trying to give you a couple names that might be something to, let alone keep away from another player to get stronger against you in a matchup, make them bend to your will type of thing. Again, or if you're just looking to pepper your roster with some players moving forward, again, if you're in a redraft league, keeper league, stuff like that more so, where you get to hang on to a couple players maybe. So it's almost kind of got that dynasty feel to it. Look at some of these names, look at how they've been playing. But for the most part, again, some of them are going to get you over the hump. And again, if you see a Jerick McKinnon out there on a waiver wire, God forbid, like there shouldn't even be a hesitation to get a guy like that. But again, at this point, you're looking at pretty much what's going to get you home. So again, we are just looking to fill in the blanks and give you maybe a little trick of the trade just to try to get you over the hump and get you to that fantasy football championship. For Pat, I am Scott. We will see you in our Week 16 starts and sits. Peace.